Russian President Vladimir Putin said Western sanctions were akin to war on Saturday as his forces pressed on with their assault on Ukraine. On the 10th day of war, planned civilian evacuations from 2 besieged cities were called off as Russia and Ukraine traded blame over the failure to provide safe passage to civilians fleeing Mariupol and Volnovakha. The Russian Defense Ministry said its units had opened corridors near the cities, which have been encircled by its troops. But in Mariupol, the city council said Russia was not observing a ceasefire. According to RIA News Agency, Russia's defense ministry accuses Ukrainian nationalists of preventing civilians from leaving. The International Committee of the Red Cross said it believed that evacuations from both cities would no longer start on Saturday. Russia denies targeting civilians or invading Ukraine and calls its actions a special military operation. Aid agencies have warned of a humanitarian disaster across the country as food, water and medical supplies run short.
Is this Ukraine crisis playing out and how big of a problem is it for the rest of the world?
Yeah. Actually, it's a very serious problem. I'd say the chances of war there are about 60 to 65%, and I'll tell you why. In the last 2 conversations President Biden had with President Putin, he sort of let the cat out of the bag. Number one, in the first conversation, he said he's not going to use force. So Putin calculated that the president's not going to use force. And then the second time they had a conversation, the president conceded that he would remove offensive weapon systems from Russia's borders, which of course is exactly what Putin wants. And then the third thing is, and this is important, Putin has made it very clear that he regards these drastic sanctions on the horizons as acts of war. Danica, there's no doubt about it. People think sanctions is a free kick at somebody. In fact, sanctions poisons everything, the diplomacy and sort of preconditions everything else. And Putin's made it very clear, drastic sanctions will be considered an act of war. He even told the president, I hope our descendants don't judge us badly by it. And this is, whether the U.S. applies sanctions on China, China on Australia. I mean, people think sanctions is a game. It's not a game. It hits at the heart of a country. And when the U.S. put sanctions on Japan in 1940 over oil, it got Pearl Harbor about 6 months later. So these things have sort of momentum. But this is probably the most serious crisis we're going to have in early 2022. And so, I think we ought to calculate for it. And of course, the other thing, too, is that President Putin here, Danica, regards this as the Cuban Missile Crisis for him. It's only 758 kilometers from the Ukrainian border to Moscow. So if you put a nuclear warhead on a short-range ballistic missile, it'll reach there in about 3 minutes, taking out the command and control center and also Putin in his night's sleep. So he's worried about everything. And the president, of course, is just trying to put pressure on him. The United States will not be coming directly to the aid of President Zelensky. They're just trying to give him moral support. On the other hand, it's very important that NATO do something in the background because you got to have a line somewhere. But the Putin's looking for kind of a neutralization zone to keep NATO out. And of course, I heard a wonderful expression the other day. Putin's not really worried about NATO, and he's not really worried about Ukraine. What he's worried about is NATO in Ukraine. He's worried about the future positioning of offensive weapons there that could take out the Moscow's command and control center. And of course,
ракетной обороны. Мы долго уговаривали это не делать. Это один из основополагающих фундаментальных договоров обеспечения безопасности в мире. Тем не менее, Соединенные Штаты сделали то, что сделали, вышли, и теперь пусковые установки ПРО находятся в Румынии и в Польше создаются, скоро будут, наверное, если еще не сделали. А там стоят пусковые установки МК-41, на которые можно устанавливать томагавки. То есть это уже не противоракета, а ударные системы, которые будут покрывать нашу территорию на тысячи километров. Но это разве не угроза для нас? Представим себе, что Украина является членом НАТО. И напичкана оружием, стоят современные ударные системы, так же, как в Польше и в Румынии. Кто помешает? И начинает операции в Крыму. Сейчас не говорю даже про Донбасс. Это суверенная российская территория. Вопрос для нас в этом смысле закрыт. Представим, что Украина страна НАТО и начинает эти военные операции. Нам что, воевать с блоком НАТО? Но мне представляется, что те же Соединенные Штаты не столько заботятся о безопасности Украины, хотя, может быть, и думают об этом, но где-то на втором плане. Но самая главная их задача – сдерживание развития России. Вот в чем дело. В этом смысле сама Украина – это просто инструмент достижения этой цели. Это можно сделать разными путями, втянув нас в какой-то вооруженный конфликт и заставить, в том числе своих союзников в Европе, ввести против нас те самые жесткие санкции, о которых говорят сегодня в США. Тянуть Украину в НАТО, наставить там ударных систем оружия и стимулировать каких-нибудь бендеровцев на решение вопроса Донбасса или Крыма вооруженным путем. И таким образом все равно втянуть нас в вооруженный конфликт. Желая избежать подобного негативного развития ситуации, а мы хотим его избежать, нужно по-настоящему учитывать интересы всех стран, в том числе и России, и найти вариант решения этой проблемы.